On Friday, the Toronto Star's Dan Robson wrote, "Alex Hundert's words will not appear in this story. Unlike other Canadians, he's not allowed to speak to the press." That's because on Tuesday, social justice activist and G20 defendant Alex Hundert of Toronto was judged to have breached his bail conditions by participating in a university panel discussion. His newest bail conditions were then amended to include a ban on all public political expression. Hundert is one of 20 organizers facing serious conspiracy charges stemming from June's G20 protests, and his case has served as a litmus test for civil liberties in Canada.
When I say free Alex, you say nah, free Alex, free Alex. Now we're calling for justice.
Huntert's battle with the law began in June when he was arrested at gunpoint, along with his partner Leah Henderson, in a 4 a.m. pre-summit raid on their Toronto home. After spending a month in prison, Hundert and Henderson were released on $100,000 bail apiece, with 20 stringent conditions, which included conditional house arrest and a promise not to participate in public demonstrations. After Hundert gave a handful of interviews to the press, the police tried to have him thrown back in jail for breach of the no public demonstration condition, but the courts ruled that talking to the media isn't a public demonstration. Soon after, Hundert appeared as an invited guest on a panel at Ryerson University.
A year-and-a-half-long police operation where undercover police infiltrated our organizations, partially because we're just not as smart as we think we are. As a result, people are facing potential serious jail time.
The panel was called Strengthening Our Resolve and stressed a need for unity across issues and tactics. It included organizers fighting for queer and transgender rights, Indigenous sovereignty, poverty eradication, migrant justice, and other objectives.
And it's really important also for people to never give up, never stop fighting, and never surrender. And that's part of why we put this event together and why I'm speaking here. And I hope that the cops in the audience don't try to arrest me today. Thank you.
When Hundert arrived at his dad's home that night, the police did just that, arguing that the panel was a breach of his no demonstration condition.
This is typically what a panel or an indoor meeting looks like. Now this is what a demonstration looks like.
Hundert was jailed for another 4 weeks before being given the new condition of a ban on expressing political views. The Real News spoke to Yogi Acharya, a member of both the Toronto Community Solidarity Network and the migrant justice group known as Illegal.
Blatant attacks on community organizers is clearly meant to set a precedent and to send a warning sign to the broader activist community and to communities in general, I think, to not resist and to not sort of voice opposition to these exploitative policies. So I think the intent is clear, it's to criminalize dissent and to use any kind of means to do so, even if that means making examples out of people who have been vocal and who have been public.
Hundert spent an additional 4 weeks in jail before the courts agreed with the police that the panel appearance represented a breach of his bail, and they conditioned his re-release upon accepting a full-out ban on political expression. Hundert told the court that he would rather remain in jail than consent to his own gagging, but less than 24 hours later, Hundert was free on bail. His brother Jonah Hundert told The Real News that prison officials threatened to keep Alex in solitary confinement indefinitely without access to a phone call, lawyer, or any of his property unless he immediately signed the bail conditions. Jonah added in a press release that, quote, "Forcing Alex to sign these egregiously unjust bail conditions under duress is absolutely unacceptable." Osgoode law professor Alan Young was quoted in the Toronto Star as saying, quote, "It's basically putting a gag order on a citizen of Canada when it's not clear that the gag order is at all necessary to protect public order." He added that the conditions were unheard of in modern-day Canada. The Real News spoke to Hundert in September, between jail stints and before he was banned from speaking, in order to find out more about this longtime activist that the government was intent on silencing.
And the fear of imprisonment and the fear of the abuses that happen in prison, that is explicitly there to try and dissuade people from resistance. And while that was something I was aware of before I went in, it is a lot clearer to me now.
Hundert is a well-known organizer around various issues, and throughout our interview he pleaded that people not lose sight of those issues. He highlighted his opposition to the Canadian government's imprisonment of Tamil migrants seeking refuge from persecution in Sri Lanka.
They've been totally criminalized and demonized as terrorists or potential terrorists or threats to national security.
And the approximately 490 individuals on board, including suspected human smugglers and terrorists, did not come to Canada's shores by accident.
Which is the same discourse they're putting out about us. You know, there was this huge mass arrest in Toronto, 1,000+ people, the largest in Canadian history. Several weeks later, 492 Tamil migrants were mass arrested and are all still in detention, including women and children.
Some campaigns Hundert has helped organize include opposition to the war in Afghanistan, land defense from development, and dependence on oil. But perhaps most important to him is supporting struggles for Indigenous sovereignty, opposing what he sees as the Canadian government's ongoing colonization of the land's Indigenous nations. He points to the two-row wampum agreement as an alternative model. The 1613 agreement was the first between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, or Iroquois, and the European settlers.
It represents two separate vessels containing the cultures and the politics of separate nations that travel down the same river, and each vessel carries down on its own path in a way that does not impede the other's ability to make its own decisions. The fact that it's a single river reflects the inherent need for people to recognize that we all share common land bases, and that there needs to be room for autonomous decisions to be made by autonomous and sovereign communities and nations that share a single land base. And I think our culture is so off from that model. I mean, we are inherently making decisions that destroy not just other people's ability to have a future, but even our own ability to have a future. And in order to secure profit for the privileged now, this culture seems quite willing to destroy all other paths. In Indigenous communities where sovereignty is on the table, or where land defense is something that communities are engaged in, those communities are also targeted and criminalized. It seems to be our model, contrary to this model, is one that says there is only one path, and anyone who challenges that path will be targeted for destruction.
While appreciative of the support people are showing for him, Hundert has expressed his desire that people not lose sight of the larger issues while standing up for his civil liberties. He explained why during our interview in September.
It is almost a waste of time to spend our time fighting for the right to fight. By fighting for the things we believe in, we assert our right to fight back against an exploitative, destructive system. And that's a right that can't be won, it has to be asserted. Fighting back against the so-called austerity agenda, fighting back against repeal of social services, of access to health services and education, fighting back against those has tremendous value, because those are the day-to-day circumstances of the people most fucked over by the system. But for people to fight just for their right to fight so that they feel better about, the farce of this democracy, because, I could take the streets if I wanted to, I think that's totally worthless. I think the way to continue to have the right to protest is to protest. The way to continue to have space for resistance is to resist, to actually build those spaces and to defend them.
Hundert will have to wait at least 1 month to appeal his gag condition. Nathalie Desrosiers, head of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, has already promised to intervene in Huntert's defense, saying that speaking to the media does not threaten public safety. These bail conditions are only aimed at silencing speech. As for Huntert's conspiracy trial, the details of which are under a court-ordered publication ban, it is expected to drag out for years to come. Meanwhile, to the south, people are also mobilizing against the policing of dissent. In part 2, we meet up with a group putting forth a creative response to recent FBI raids in the United States.